It's the awareness piece that helps us realize this is going on in our backyard. That's where you see real solutions and real action take place.
It's just as equally important for all of us to understand how we should interact with these victims, with these survivors. How you respond to them can truly set the path for the rest of their life.
Your job is just to be there and make sure they're not alone.
I really feel like it's important to bring victims out of the shadows so that we can see what's really going on in our communities. If we can save one person from this trauma that is so horrific, if we can save one person, it's worth it.
Okay, everybody, we're invited to come take your seats again. We'll start the next session. In this next session, you're going to hear from Dr. Erika George, the director of Tanner Humanities Center. And this is all focused, by the way, on aligning business objectives and philanthropic efforts. And I'm excited about this particular session. You're going to hear from Dr. Erika George, the director of Tanner Humanities Center at University of Utah, Dr. Kelly Gage, director of advancement at Nomi Network, and Scott Anderson, who is the CEO of Zions Bank. Derek Miller will be moderating the panel, and he is the president of the Salt Lake Chamber. He's also a member of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Task Force to Eradicate Human Trafficking. We look forward to that panel, but to introduce this panel, I'd like to welcome survivor leader Julie Whitehead to this stage. Julie is a good friend. She's a fantastic individual, and she's an advocate for survivors of abuse and trafficking and serves on the Malouf Foundation Advisory Board. Julie, today she's going to share ways that business intersects with her experience and as a trafficking survivor and the role that business leaders can play to address the challenges of human trafficking. The panel will immediately follow Julie's comments, and so please welcome to the stage Julie Whitehead.
Hi, thank you for having me here today. It's amazing to be a part of such an important event. I've been telling my story for the last 2 years, so some of you may have heard it already, but for those who haven't, I'll just give a brief version of it. You could say that my life went from bad to worse to infinitely worse, and I just had to wonder, why me? Why, when I got out of one situation that was terrible, did I almost immediately find myself in another? Well, it took years of therapy and learning about trauma to fully understand and come to grips with the cycle of revictimization and the way that the trauma brain works and responds. Looking back, I can see that one event just primed me for the next, and it was all evident to my perpetrators that I was vulnerable, and that's what they took advantage of. So I was born and raised here in Utah. Beginning around the age of 4, I began being sexually abused by someone close to me. And this abuse lasted through my early teen years when I met a boyfriend who I thought would rescue me from all of it. Turns out this boy was abusive as well. And I had been abused for so many years that I was conditioned to take his treatment and disregard the red flags if I saw them at all. Well, we married young and had 3 children, but his abuse kept escalating year after year until finally I was so hopeless and devastated that I decided to end my life. When I came out of the hospital, my then husband told me in no uncertain terms that I was to be instantly better and to stop shaming him with my stories of depression and anxiety. Well, I didn't know how to do that, and so I thought maybe getting a job would help. So I found a job teaching preschool that I really loved, but unfortunately it put me in contact with one of the fathers of one of my students who just happened to be a trafficker. I was now divorced. My husband had been arrested for domestic violence, and I was at the beginning of what would be a terrible custody battle. Meanwhile, this father groomed me over a period of time, and then when I least expected it, he turned on me, and he made me take trips with him where he sold me to other men. I actually lost custody of my children at this point, and I felt like my whole world was just caving in. He threatened harm against me and my family. He even threatened to kill us if I told anyone or tried to get away. This left me alone to survive for my kids' sake in the hopes of one day being reunited with them. This man trafficked me for 5 months throughout the state of Utah and into the surrounding states, even across the US-Mexico border. But despite his threats, I did try to escape several times. One time I made it to an auto parts store, another time I made it to a Home Depot. But each time my trafficker was able to catch up with me and diffuse the situation with lies and manipulation, leaving the clerks and attendants confused about what was going on, and they didn't feel like taking any action and just let us walk out the door. Then one day my trafficker made me meet with his employer to discuss the sale of a vehicle, and something really amazing happened at that meeting. His employer saw me. He actually saw me. He questioned what was going on with me, and he would later tell me that something just didn't feel right in his gut about what he was seeing. It was this man, my trafficker's employer, the owner of several local businesses, who saved me from my trafficking situation. And since then, this man has incorporated the on-watch training into all of his companies, and he is a voice for anti-trafficking and anti-exploitation. Although my trafficker used the business as a means to traffic me, it was also the owner of this business who rescued me and took the cause to heart. I tell you all of this because I can say personally that I know businesses can make a huge impact in the lives of trafficking victims. This business owner told me that by taking on this cause, his companies have become more unified and see themselves as doing something together greater than they ever imagined. Their employers are happier and more engaged, and they've spread the word to their customers and colleagues. They're truly in this fight to end sex trafficking in their communities. So with that, I would like to introduce the next panel and some very influential business leaders who are no doubt making a tremendous impact of their own. Thanks.
Well, good morning, everyone. We are grateful to be with you, and thank you, Julie, for sharing your important story. As all of you know, and many of you represent businesses, business has an important role to play, not only in the issue that we are discussing at this conference today, but in a number of important social issues. And I'm so grateful to be joined by three great business and community leaders. In just a moment, I'll give them the opportunity to introduce themselves. To set the stage on this issue of businesses being involved, I'm Derek Miller. I'm the president of the Salt Lake Chamber. And 3 years ago, the Salt Lake Chamber started the Utah Community Builders Foundation. It is a foundation with the purpose of being an outlet for businesses to be able to get involved on important social issues. In particular, the three issues that the Utah Community Builder Foundation is focused on include poverty, upward mobility, mental fitness in the workplace, and child care. But this issue of human trafficking is also a cause that is important to us, and I'm grateful for the opportunity that I have to serve on the Anti-Human Trafficking Board of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and especially grateful to the Malouf family and to the Malouf Foundation for shedding light and bringing the right people together to have this important conversation. With that, as I said, I'm grateful to be joined by these colleagues, and I will let them introduce themselves, the organizations they represent, and then we'll get started with our conversation. Maybe we'll start on the end, Scott, and have you go first and come this way.
Good. Well, I'm Scott Anderson, and I'm president and CEO of Zions Bank, and I too want to thank Casey and Sam for setting up this foundation and for hosting this summit. This is an important topic, and the more information we can get out, the more we can do to stop this. And I hope everyone read the article in the April 4th Desert News about the Maloufs and how they started. It was a fascinating story, but what really got me there is that they wanted to create a company that was community centered, and they certainly have. And so anyway, it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Scott. Erika.
Hi, thank you. My name is Erika George. I'm a professor of law at the S.J. Quinney College of Law, and I direct the Tanner Humanities Center at the University of Utah. I'm here actually because one of my former students, Jeff Steed, has invited me, and I wanted to thank the Malouf Foundation for all that they do. One of the things I teach at University of Utah is a corporate citizenship and human rights course. So I've been always interested in the ways in which power can be used for good. And business can do an immeasurable amount of good. So my research has also focused on corporate social responsibility, business and human rights, and there's been a tremendous amount of progress with the power of business behind detecting abuses and working in ways to address them. So I'm deeply grateful to the Malouf Foundation for being here and having the opportunity to discuss this important issue with you today.
Kelly.
I'm Kelly Gage. I am the Director of Advancement for Nomi Network, which is an anti-trafficking organization with workforce development programs globally. I actually came into anti-trafficking work from other angles, though, through the business lens, being part of Carlson companies and the Carlson Family Foundation, which has had a very high focus on anti-trafficking work for over 2 decades. So that is really, we'll talk about that more as we move through the questions. And I met Casey and Sam through another mutual friend and was just so excited to learn about their foundation and learn the anti-trafficking work that they are doing within the community and even the broader community, because there isn't anywhere in the world that isn't touched by trafficking.
So Kelly's visiting us from Minneapolis.
Yes.
The rest of us are locals. So we're grateful to have you come specifically for this conference. And when we were back in the green room there, I asked you this question: how did you and how did your organization get involved? And she had an answer that I was not expecting. So I'd love for you to share that with the
Okay. Getting involved in anti-trafficking work, as I said, started a couple of decades ago, and it was actually at the request of the Queen of Sweden. So she sent someone. I know. So she, the entire Carlson family wears their Swedish heritage quite proudly on their sleeves, and have had engagement with the royal family in Sweden for a long time. She sent someone. She had an experience in a prison in Russia with a child being trafficked out of the prison system, and she, of course, was horrified and started the organization World Childhood Foundation, which works globally against child sexual exploitation. And as she was launching this, she was looking for co-founders. She came to our foundation, asked us to become co-founders. I was on the board at the time and asked some very pointed questions about the program in Brazil. I was an exchange student in Brazil between high school and college. And the man that was there, my mother-in-law, at one point said, it was like, oh, Kelly lived in Brazil, that's why she's asking so many questions. And it was this really, I want to say, outside of an American realm of this back and forth of him going back to Sweden, telling the Queen about me, and her coming back and saying, well, if you were asked to be on the foundation board in Brazil, would you say yes? And so I did say yes. I had to meet her, and I have met her several times. But it's, and this is like for a girl from like a small town in central Minnesota, that is not what you grow up thinking you're gonna do. So yeah, that was my entree into anti-trafficking work and really brought me, I'm on the board of Childhood in Brazil still, and that brought me into the introduction of the nonprofit that I'm working for now.
Thank you. Erika, I want to ask you this question because of your work at the University of Utah, and you talked a little bit about it. But let's start broadly and then narrow in. Just philanthropy in general, as it relates to businesses, why is this important to businesses? What are you seeing, and what's the business case for it?
Sure, absolutely. I actually want to begin with the O.C. Tanner Foundation. One of the things I do is direct the Tanner Humanities Center. That's been sustained support for education, for research, and for public outreach. And much of what we've heard today has been about education. So having foundations that are strong support for education is invaluable because people seed and spread and grow ideas in the world. The things that we've done at the law school have included our Students for Social Justice initiative, launching a human trafficking symposium that happens annually where we look at different dimensions of issues of human trafficking. And because we have multiple units on campus, we have people working on gender-based violence and interpersonal violence through different interdisciplinary lenses. So I think that really the foundation piece is the voluntary, not required, what it is you're doing to advance things. I also think important is a piece of having corporate responsibility and accountability. I looked at the Malouf Foundation, well, the Malouf Company's Code of Conduct, and in it you'll see not just the commitment to donations and foundations and philanthropy, but doing business in a way that is respectful of human rights, that incorporates provisions on looking for forced labor in our supply chain and advancing ways to address that. So I think of philanthropy and business ethics as interrelated and interdependent, and they must be in conversation with one another. It's important to give back to the community, but the way you are a corporate citizen in the community is, I think, also equally vitally important, because if you can change the way business is done, you can change the world. And it's been exciting for me to be a part of those conversations, to help guide students to thinking about ways they might incorporate human rights or understanding of the environment, or ways that power and choice, if we are in a position to be in leadership or to know leaders, to have conversations with them about how they can deploy that power in ways to uplift others and enrich our community.
Your comment about doing business the right way and being a good corporate citizen is the perfect segue to Zions Bank.
Absolutely.
And Zions Bank and the Chamber of Commerce share something in that we both run organizations that predate the state of Utah. Not many organizations can say that, but it certainly speaks to the pillar in our community that is Zions Bank. And Scott, the question I'd love to ask you is, well, two questions. Why is that so important to Zions Bank to be involved in these efforts? And then how do you drive that through the culture to what Erika said about the volunteerism, getting your employees involved, not just a corporate level, but down at a grassroots level?
Well, I would start by saying that my belief, my strong belief, is that businesses should use their power and their resources for doing more than making profits. They should look at how they can create value, obviously for their customers, but their communities, and for their shareholders, and for their employees. And I like the comment, and we've adopted it internally, that Henry Ford said, that if a company only makes money, it's a poor company. And when Zions was founded in 1873, it was reported in the Desert News at the time that Brigham Young said he was founding this to make it the heart of the community, and that it can assist not only individuals and businesses grow, but that it will assist the community to get better. And so that has been part of our DNA from the very beginning. And we believe that strongly, and we've created a series of guidelines that say we are about creating value, value for our customers, for our communities, for our shareholders, for our employees. And that's our guiding principle. It is not we're going to make money. Obviously we have to do that to create value for our shareholders and for our employees, but we're there to create value. And I think everyone in the organization, we stress that, and that they believe it and they act that way. And I hope that each employee, as they get up, says, am I going to create value today, or how can I create value today? And so we encourage them not only to provide great service to their employees, but also to reach out and be engaged in important community committees and projects, and help find creative solutions for community issues.
Thank you. Let me open this next question up to all three of you, whichever would like to respond. We're obviously here today talking about anti-sexual violence, anti-human trafficking. What would you like to share about your organization's involvement in this area, and how that might serve as a model to other business leaders and community leaders that we have here? Kelly?
I can speak into that. What I said earlier was specifically about how I got involved in anti-trafficking work, but it really came at a time where, it wasn't just me, it was the entire family. And the CEO of Carlson at the time, Marilyn Nelson, took it on from the corporate perspective and really brought it into the ethos of the company. We were hospitality, major hotel brands, travel, et cetera, at the time, and really bringing it into the corporate realm. We have people like myself that are working on a global level in anti-trafficking work, and then even domestically. So we really took it in a lot of different avenues. It's a part of the foundation. It's a part of our CSR. It's a part of our employee education, particularly when you're talking about hotels and people and businesses that are out there, a bank where somebody is a teller. Julie's comment about what happened in seeing the employer, having people trained to look at what's happening has been a part of the company for over 2 decades now. And so it really can go beyond just a single individual being emotionally grabbed by this horrific thing that is still happening in our world today, to really bringing it into the broader community and making people aware of it. When I first became involved in this so many years ago, nobody talked about trafficking. Like I was like at cocktail parties or whatever and bringing this up, and it was like well, this doesn't exist. It doesn't happen in our country, and that still happens sometimes. But it has been a vast change to more businesses recognizing it and really being involved. Carlson was one of the first, or was the first hospitality company to sign ECPAT. Delta then came in too. So it is something that it can happen at a small 10 people sitting around a table and having this introduced to them bringing it out into the world. So it can really go beyond just a single individual.
Excellent. Erika or Scott?
So we were talking before this when I was so excited to learn you were at Carlson Hotels. So I've been for a decade researching corporate social responsibility, business and human rights. And about a decade ago, the United Nations adopted guiding principles. So principles that should direct the business to recognize that there's a responsibility to respect human rights. And part of that is having a policy commitment to human rights, like a code of conduct. But the rest of it is really doing human rights due diligence. It's having an understanding of what your impacts are, assessing that, and then addressing what you find the risks to be. Human trafficking is a very real risk that touches businesses. So Carlson Hotels was among the first to start training people to identify victims of sex abuse and trafficking, because
the team wasn't happy about that.
Yeah,
so
well, but it goes up and down. Nestle also has problems. So when you have the problem, but you get ahead of it, you identify it, you are open about it, I think there's a lot of grace that businesses get. So I mentioned Nestle. They've had challenges in their supply chain. There is actual modern slavery on Ivory Coast, cocoa plantations, children trafficked from Ghana and in between, and they're picking your cocoa. Also hazelnuts in Turkey. And once they found these issues, they actually disclosed them and began starting to address them, and then built philanthropy around getting schools and the kinds of things that children didn't have or families didn't have access to, that it made it more difficult to keep your children and support them. So providing the broader community support, realizing that you are reliant on that source of supply. So are there ways that you can redirect and reimagine where you're getting sources from? Delta Airlines has also done a tremendous amount training people to look for risks and identify them, and then ultimately addressing them. I really love that this foundation also talks about healing and advocacy. I'm mostly interested in the front end, how do we prevent, how do we protect? But business can be a part of that whole story. There are financiers who are looking to asking questions. Am I going to really invest in this company if I'm not sure that they are in the right place where they need to be to have a policy commitment, to have protections in place? And I think we're seeing more investors become interested in this. I came to learn more about it through the Interfaith Council on Corporate Responsibility. These are socially conscious investors. A lot of them are religious pension funds who've always been asking social questions, not just the financial questions. Of course, shareholders are interested in their returns, but they found that over time, if a business is ethical, the broader returns in the long term will be beneficial. And I think those are the kinds of places we also want to work or patronize and buy from. So having consistency between the philanthropy, the principles that guide the business, and ultimately what you're creating in the community can make powerful change. This has been over time, not overnight. We were having this conversation a decade ago. Well, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So it's critically important to have business leaders use their leverage to bring along other actors in the supply chain and in the value system and bring values to bear.
Well, it may surprise some that the banking industry is required to look at human trafficking and track money as it flows through the system. And when you think that the last number I heard is that there's it's a $150 billion global business. And while certainly some of the traffickers may be unbanked, the bulk of them process that money and launder that money through financial institutions. And so the government has set up what they call the Bank Secrecy Act, which is to watch for money laundering. And it was originally set up to track drug money and look at money flowing to terrorist operations. In 2020, specifically human sex trafficking was listed. And so banks have to go through all of their accounts and all of their transactions, and they have to identify individuals and transactions that they think may be suspect. And this is done by very sophisticated algorithms on is this transaction outside of the normal course that this person normally does? Is it coming from numerous sources? Are they trying to package their services so that it won't be noticed? And then we have to submit this information on a monthly basis to the Treasury Department, to the financial, what's called FinCEN. It's the government's financial investigation unit that tracks all of this information, reviews it, and then decides if there's value for this particular customer or this particular company to be investigated by the Department of Justice and to be prosecuted. But the other thing that they do is that they come back after they do all of this analysis of all of these reports, and we probably submit close to 100,000 reports a year. So these are that they come back to banks with red flags saying, you know, here's how these things are changing. Look for this and look for that. So we're involved in that every day. But the second thing is that we are training and have trained our employees, our frontline employees, especially our tellers, to watch for people coming in and to look for elder abuse, to look for instances of fraud and scam, and to look if this person is a victim of trafficking, and if so, to note it so that we can come back and present that. But then the third thing that we do is to try and help victims after they come out of the trafficking situation to reestablish their credit, because a lot of them, come out with terrible credit, and some of them come out with, a lot of debt, and they need to have some type of bank account. They need to have some type of credit card. They need to have these basic services if they are going to really come back into the society. And I was pleased that our industry has been working with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and they came out last week with a proposed new rule to the Consumer Credit Reporting Act that would prohibit any credit reporting organization to report on an individual's credit if it came through trafficking. And now the individual would have to notify the agency. And that proposal is currently up for comment through May 9th. And I would encourage everyone, and I'd encourage the Malouf Foundation to submit a comment supporting that, because that can go a long way in helping customers rebuild their credit.
Excellent. Scott, I want to stay with you for just a moment. The title of our session is Aligning Business Objectives with the Philanthropic Efforts. It's so important to have that alignment because you want to maximize the benefit, you want to maximize the outcome, yet at the same time, there are so many good things that any business can be involved in. How do you decide? How should a business go about deciding how they're going to make that alignment so that they can maximize the benefit?
Well, I think and what we do, and I think this is a best practice, is that you have to look into your community and you have to say, what are the pressing issues that our community is facing, and what can we do to help solve them? Now, we can use our balance sheet in ways that can be meaningful. We can lend in ways that are meaningful. But we can also encourage our employees to volunteer and to donate. And we can make grants and donations to help nonprofits specifically to accomplish these efforts. And so we do that.
Erika, what advice do you give to businesses who are trying to figure this out, where they should get involved?
You should get involved where your strengths are, where are your advantages, where can you contribute, and make sure that what you're doing is aligned. I mean, Carlson was a wonderful example. We're a hospitality industry. We see tourism. We know that there are risks inherent there. So we're going to align our business policies and our training with the philanthropic efforts that we engage in. This is aside or not within the realm of human trafficking, but I also think Patagonia is an interesting example. They've come out strong on issues of environment and climate change. They also have a philanthropic lending arm that is supporting frontline communities that have disproportionately been impacted by environmental degradation. So they are both walking their talk, consistent with their corporate code of conduct, putting pressure on buyers, suppliers, well, frankly, everywhere that they can. And they're also investing in grassroots environmental groups to keep a conversation going. One could imagine that happening in other industry sectors as well. So I think understanding what the mission and purpose of your business is, not being afraid of engaging with stakeholders as well as being responsible to your shareholders. And also, as Scott said, understanding and knowing the community that you are part of. But I would encourage you to think expansively about what community is. I am worried about the us-them that seems to be in ascendance right now. And I think business can have an important role in helping us to see the ways in which we are connected.
Kelly, you already shared the Carlson story, just as Erika mentioned. There was good alignment there, but yet I would imagine that even with that initial alignment, there's times along the way that you have to realign and figure out, are there some things where we need to put more effort, more time, and maybe some things we're not going to be able to do.
Right. Well, that is true. I mean, the human trafficking vein has really continued on in support of women and women moving into the workforce. So that has really kind of maintained a strong focus of our CSR efforts, particularly in workforce development. And that's actually where Nomi Network, the nonprofit that I work for, came into my realm of knowledge, was through support from our foundation. And I'd like to tag on to the question that you guys answered as far as like the corporate involvement, but it goes beyond just, yes, knowing your passion, knowing your strength areas, and working up that, thinking expansively, thinking within supply chain. I mean, I would venture to say probably every single one of you is wearing something or has something on your body right now that is touched by human trafficking and forced labor. So just thinking about that, and that is where the nonprofit that I work for comes at anti-trafficking work from a workforce development perspective, educating the women about their rights. We help them open bank accounts in India and in the US and know their legal rights, help them find secure employment, safe employment, looking within the supply chains. Shahi Industries, which is a very large apparel manufacturer in India, is one of our partners. But beyond that, so we're working at it from the education, women's side, girls' side, anti-trafficking side. But then also another thing that we're doing as a nonprofit is working with corporations to start creating policies within their own HR and hiring to hire victims. Because in addition to coming with a lack of credit, they often come with a criminal record. And how do you get through a background check and get into the HR hiring process with that? So we're working, I could go on and on. I mean, creating a trauma-informed work environment, a hiring environment. So it's also coming at it from that perspective. It's great, and obviously I've been very involved in going out from a business perspective and into the community from the nonprofit side, but it's also, what are you doing to bring people up and into having their own safe employment and their own income to protect themselves from re-victimization?
Okay, second to last question. We've got lots of great community and business leaders out here. We've heard a lot of good stories, good examples, good advice. A piece of advice that we haven't heard yet that you'd love to share, and Erika, maybe we can start with you. Anything that we haven't shared yet that needs to be shared?
Sure. Well, there are a couple of things I'd like to highlight. I sit on the board of the Fair Labor Association. This was an organization that was started when students started protesting sweatshop labor in the athletic equipment. So we ensure that University of Utah has only been selling licensed goods that are traced through the supply chain. This is a collective of companies, of nonprofits, and they co-create leadership and learning. So identifying where are risks in the supply chain. Most recently, the member companies, including things like Adidas, Nike, have been thinking about how are we sourcing from regions of China and trying to engage with one another and with the government in ways to work together. So I think one thing I'd like to emphasize is multi-stakeholder initiatives like the Fair Labor Association. Nestle's a part of that. You get learning, support, and other business leaders engaging in how we're going to do sustainability. The other thing I'd like to say, and this comes from hearing Scott and Kelly, there are ways in which law has been less than helpful for getting victims back on their feet, survivors back on their feet. So being cognizant of the rights and responsibilities that we are setting up. There are developments in the UK. There's a Modern Slavery Act that's emphasizing the responsibility of businesses to disclose and detect. The state of California also has a Modern Slavery Act. So we're getting more information about this phenomenon. With more information, we can do better and do more and make a difference. So I guess I would say continual learning, support to advance policies, and to be a leader in this space. So it's so critically important that Malouf Foundation is doing the work that it is. I also noticed that Malouf Company is a B company, which means it's a benefit company. They're thinking more broadly about what being a business is about, and changing the conversation in those ways, I think, is critically important to our path forward.
Thank you. Scott?
I would just follow up on what Erika said. I think that we really need, as the Malouf Foundation is doing through summits like this, is to get the word out. You know, when a lot of people talk about human trafficking, they say it's in third world countries. It's not here. Maybe it's in New York, but it's not in Salt Lake City. It's not in Provo. And I think the examples that you've heard today, it is here. And in fact, I think Utah is the fourth largest state in human trafficking in the country. So it's a significant problem, but it's not listed as that. And I think with the knowledge then the sort of the Utah spirit comes together, and we can collaborate and partner with the legislature, with governments, with businesses, with nonprofits, with the university, and come up with really terrific solutions for this. And an example I would use, and Derek, you were involved in this, in the 2021 legislative session, they were facing two significant problems that we have in Utah: homelessness and affordable housing. And they passed some landmark legislation that not only reorganized how the homeless services were provided, but they also allocated $50 million for affordable housing and homeless services. And then the philanthropic community, the business community, came together and said, and this was part of the legislation, we will match that $50 million. And with that, we will create an impact fund and a housing preservation fund that will leverage that money and create $1 billion worth of affordable housing financing. And if you use that as an example and you think, if people would say human trafficking is one of the major issues that we in Utah have to look at and face, then how can we all come together and collaborate and partner to accomplish and find a solution?
Great example. Thank you. Kelly.
I would just add that the idea of collaboration and working with other companies or becoming a part of an organization can make you as an individual have a bigger impact as a whole, but also think about you as an individual. I mean, sometimes these global problems seem so big, it's just, what do I do about this? I can't make a difference, but you can. From an individual perspective, as far as just even your awareness and being here, you made a choice to become even more aware of this problem. So living your life with your eyes wide open as you're driving along the freeways and you're at a rest area or going along about your business. I mean, as like bank tellers, I heard a story of a Southwest Airlines luggage. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the word. Like the people that deal with the luggage. And
that sounds right.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure there's an official title. So Southwest Airlines is another airlines now that has literal training on anti-trafficking work all the way down to the luggage handlers is the word I was looking for. Luggage handlers sitting at a McDonald's eating their lunch, and they saw a man with a young girl, and they identified her as a trafficking victim and saved her. So it's even within your company, like giving that training all the way down. So as your businesses, they can make a difference, but even you as an individual, if you're sitting in McDonald's and you see something that you're like, oh, this doesn't feel right, step forward. Because there are going to be these victims who don't feel, as we heard earlier, don't feel like they can step forward on their own at that time.
We've got 2 minutes left, so this will be our last question. One of the things that I love about coming to an event like this is when I can leave with a specific action item, something I know I can start doing today. And so the last question is, what's something that people can leave and do today to help in this cause? And I'm going to take the facilitator's privilege by offering one myself. Just 2 weeks ago, there was an excellent report that was produced by Dr. Susan Madsen out of Utah State University, Logan, where the Malouf Foundation is headquartered. And it was a report on human trafficking among Utah girls and women. As you said, Scott, things that are happening right here in our state. So I'd invite you all to go find that on the internet and to read it. It's a great place to start. Mm-hmm. Scott?
Well, I think one thing that we all can do is to donate and support the cause. And I think the Malouf Foundation is a great way and an organization to support and donate. And so I'm willing to put up, do a little crowdfunding. So Green, you know about that better than I do, but I'll match up to $50,000 any donation that comes to the Malouf Foundation through the end of this quarter. So you can work it out with Sam, and Sam can let me know, but that's one way, regardless of the amount, that all of us can get involved fairly easily.
Thank you, Scott. Erika.
That is extraordinary. So as an educator, the educator in me wants to, again, emphasize educate yourself, become more aware. I did want to point you to a resource. There is an organization that does track the California law on supply chain trafficking. It's called Know the Chain. And they will go through and rank the different companies for what they are doing to know their supply chain. So as Kelly said, none of us are untouched by the way we consume. If we can change the way we consume and become consumers of information that inform our choices. The first panel talked a lot about choices and agency. That is something we have the privilege of enjoying. So I leave you with going to the Know the Chain initiative and figuring out where you are along the chain of consuming from different places.
Excellent. Kelly.
My piece of get out there and do something would be, yes, educate yourself, yes, give, and think about that with those two things in a tandem thought process. That when you are looking to a nonprofit that you are going to support, and there are so many out globally that are doing amazing work, of course, the organization that I work for too, but big organizations, but there are also a lot of smaller organizations that are on the ground. Get to know them in a way that you trust what they're doing too. They want not just the dollars, but they want your mind and your expertise to be a part of it also. So think about giving yourself in both ways after educating yourself.
Excellent. On behalf of the panel, thank you for your time and attention today. Thanks again for the team who put this together. Please join me in thanking them.
Thank you. Great moderator.
Thank you to our panelists, and thank you again to Julie for sharing her experience. And again, special thank you to Scott Anderson, who has decided to make a $50,000 matching grant, and that's so incredible. Thank you, Scott. And I'm going to join that. I'm going to make a matching $10. Anybody can match that. I'm going to be Sam. Let me know, and I'll be sure to give that up. So. I know many of you here in the audience are business leaders, and we hope that you have a cause, something that you're passionate about, something that inspires you to make a difference. And for those of you who are interested in furthering your organization's charitable efforts, please don't hesitate to reach out to our team at the Malouf Foundation. There's incredible information in the back of your booklet. In the back, there's information about each one of the initiatives, and you can get involved. Please talk to our team about that. Right now, we're going to break for just over 15 minutes. We're going to break. We're going to get back here at 11:45 to start the next session. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.